Hello, ladies. Welcome, welcome. We're so excited that you're here joining us at our webinar on Every Generation Ask, What Do I Have to Offer? My name is Alicia Wong, and so we are excited about this topic. We actually just had this topic at the forum this past week. And so we think that this is such an important topic for the church to really address and look at. And so we felt this was super important for us to do that. But before we even get started, there's several reminders that I wanted to share with you all. If you will start off with putting your name and just where you're from in the chat, that would be super helpful. We love to know where you're all coming from and where you're watching this webinar. And each month, we actually give away free resources to someone in our Ministry to Women's newsletter list. So you want to join and participate in our ministry news kind of for women's ministry leaders. That would be a helpful newsletter for you all. So you want to sign up for that. And Taylor will put that in the chat for us. We also have a giveaway for all of you who attend. We have two giveaways this time, not just one. So one lucky person will get Titus from Courtney Doctor and Hunter Bless. I always say her name incorrectly, so sorry, Hunter. Dwell on These Things by Vera Schmitz and Natalie Abbott. We also have a You Lead webinar exclusive that is Dr. Kelly King's Ministry to Women Essentials book. And ladies, you can just go on and get this ebook. It's all for those of you who are joining us and watching our You Lead webinars. And then also, you all may have a lot of questions as we talk about this topic. If you will look on the bottom or just kind of hover in the bottom section, there's a Q&A with a box with a question mark in there. That is where you want to put your questions because many times if you put your questions in the chat, it flies by so fast because there's so many people on this webinar and we're not able to address all those questions, and those questions are important to us. So we want to address those the last 10 minutes of our webinar. So ladies, without further ado, I want to introduce the panel. If you all can introduce yourselves, and there's specific reasons why I chose each of these ladies to represent the different generations, but also their expertise in serving the multi-generations that are here. And so a number of them have taught on this topic, but also have done and served in their church to the various generations. So Chris, if you will start us off, that would be super helpful.
I'm so happy to get to be here today and to share a little bit on this topic. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. I have been married to my husband, Pat, for 54 years. We are the parents of twin daughters. We are Yorkie parents as well, grandparents and great-grandparents to five great-grandchildren. So we're busy here, but ministry-wise, I came from a church staff in Tyler, Texas, where I was serving as the coordinator of women's ministry and missions education. And back in the day when we did not know what women's ministry was, we were trying to figure it out, and the Lord began to bless and grow our ministry there in the church. And from there, the Lord led me to Lifeway to help train leaders across the country and to learn from leaders what is happening, what's working, and what's not working. I currently serve in my church as a volunteer here in Tennessee, north of Nashville in Hendersonville. And I serve on the women's ministry team and have been the oldest member on that team for probably about 30 years now, as long as it's been around at our church. And I also lead a women's life group that I've led for about 18 years. I'm in my 6th D group that I lead on a weekly basis. And I love to read most anything. I love the beach, and reading on the beach is the best, and add chocolate to it, it's even better. And I think I'm supposed to tell you what generation I'm in. Is that right? A boomer. And remember this, once a boomer, always a boomer, never a senior.
Hey, I'm Denise O'Donohue, and I'm joining you today from Raleigh, North Carolina, where I recently retired from a formal staff position at Imago Dei Church. And I am spending my time now doing what I love most, which is mentoring young women and hanging out with young women. And I'm so happy to be here today. And I'm a boomer.
Hi guys, I'm Ann Harrison and I'm coming from Wichita Falls, Texas, which is right on the Oklahoma border, Texas and Oklahoma. And I am a Gen X. So my next birthday is going to be the big one. It's going to be the big 50. I know, it's terrible. I do know that everyone's going to want to put in the Q&A what Chris's skincare regimen is. Because when you heard that she's a great grandmother and you look at her, you're like, wait a minute, you started having children at 10. How is that possible? So this is why it's important to have multi-generational conversations because we get to find out about skincare and we get to figure out how to get our gray hair not as gray and all of those things. And then we have Faith who's telling us how to still be cool and hip. So these are all the important things about multi-generational friendships.
Right.
We're going to learn so much today. That's incredible. Well, like she said, my name is Faith. I am originally from Orlando, Florida. I saw someone is from Claremont, and so I am from Winter Garden. So we're neighbors in those cities, but ended up moving to Nashville to work at Lifeway in their student department, and then moved to Houston, where I'm at now. And I serve as the girls minister on our church staff and have been doing this for 6 years. And I absolutely love it. Those girls keep me on my toes. They're the best. They're a little stressful sometimes, but they're so worth it all the time. But I am representing, I'm kind of on the bottom half of the millennials, but also going to chat a little bit about Gen Z and Gen Alpha since I work with them and love them dearly. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Thank you, ladies. And I also am a Gen Xer. So, and I serve also at Gateway Seminary as a professor and have been serving in roles of in different seminaries. But I know some of you are sitting there going, okay, what is a boomer? What is a Gen Xer? If you're not diving into all these things. And so what I have done is I just want to go over in terms of what we're referring to when we talk about these different generations, just so that we're on the same page. And Taylor's going to help me put it in the chat, attempt to put that, with the greatest generation being those who are over 97. The silent generation is anywhere between 80 to 97. The boomers are anywhere between 61 to 79 years old. And then Gen Xers are anywhere between 45 and 60. Millennials are 29 to 44. And Generation Z is 13 to 28. And now we have the Gen Alpha that are under 13. And so that's kind of a different generation. Taylor's put in like a little summary with little characteristics about each of the generation. We won't spend too much time talking about those characteristics because you could probably research and get a lot of those. Instead, I really want to know how that helps us in women's ministry, right? What does understanding these generation really do for us? And why is that important? So my first question to all the panelists is, why is reaching the different generations important to women's ministry? I'm going to ask Chris if you will start us off. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, it is absolutely vital to the life of the church because we learn from each other. And if we don't do it, how do we reach those generations coming behind us? And probably the most important reason is because it's scriptural. Psalm 145 tells us one generation will declare your works to the next and proclaim your mighty acts. In Psalm 71:18, it says, even when I'm old and gray, God, do not abandon me while I proclaim your power to another generation and your strength for all who are to come. Psalm 102:18, this will be written for a later generation, and a people who have yet to be created will praise the Lord. And there's so many others, and often those scriptures are in the context of suffering and affliction, and that's what relates to our stories as we share those with other generations. My generation didn't share a lot of those stories, so we're not as transparent as the generations that have come behind us. But if we don't share those stories of how God was so faithful, he was always there, he was trustworthy, as we talked about at the forum this past week, then how do they grow their faith when they're going through a hard time? It's when we hold up those memorial stones or Ebenezer's or stones of help or whatever you want to call them, that is where God showed up in our lives so that those coming behind us can see when they're in the middle of that, that they too can trust a God who will help us in situations that seem impossible. And I think the results, if we don't do this, is what we see in Judges 2:10 of what happened after Joshua's generation died. That whole generation was also gathered to their ancestors. After them, another generation rose up who do not know the Lord or the works he has done for Israel. So it's vital.
Chris, it is so scary to think about our younger generation coming up, right? And not knowing why it is so important for us to have faith and to walk in that. How do we pass that on? So I think that's a huge part of why it's important. As we're mentioning this, I would love to know from our participants what generation they're from. So in the chat, if you can put down what generation, we would love to see that. If you're Gen X, if you're a boomer, if you're even millennial, if we have even some Gen Zers, that would be so much fun to see that, you know. But also for others, why is that so important as you think about the different generations?
Yeah, I would echo what Chris said for sure. The number one reason why we want to do it is not because it's just a fun thing to do, although it is, but we do it because it's biblical and for the exact reasons that Chris mentioned. She mentioned a few places in Scripture where we're instructed to tell one generation to the next. My favorite is Psalm 78 because it goes through and talks about that we want to tell the next generation so that they'll put their confidence in God and not forget God's works. And so it is vital for the church. It's vital for the faith to continue from one generation to the next. And then, of course, Titus 2, probably many of you are familiar with this as far as just doing women's ministry, but one generation comes alongside the next and tells them the things of the Lord. So, two really solid scripture. So, this is how ministry continues from one generation to the next and how we grow in faith.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think, we are always older than someone and we're always younger than someone else. So I doubt you're the oldest person in your church and you're probably not the youngest person in your church. And so there is the beauty of multi-generational friendships. And I have specific memories of women, both older and younger, because I think what multi-generational friendships and mentorship does is it gives us different perspective. We
Hmm.
sometimes get so tunnel visioned into the season of life we're in, the struggle we're in. And yet, when we can have someone not just older, but I have found my friends that are younger, they are breathing in such hope and such life and such just energy,
Mhm.
and excitement. And
Mhm.
that gets me excited. Then I get more motivated to continue on this road. So I think it's so important. We don't just have the older, but we have the younger, and it
Mhm.
helps shift our perspective.
Yeah, I
Right.
love what you said, Anne, about it being something that gives us energy. That's exactly what I say and why I love to hang out with my younger.
I love that. I mean, you guys hit all the things. One of the things, especially what Anne was just saying, that I like to think about is the blessing is mutual, right? Between interrelational generations being able to serve together, have friendship together, love well together. And I've seen that personally in my own life and ministry, where there have been times where, I've gotten up and been able to teach the word of God and have come off the stage and just felt like, man, what am I doing here? I feel like I'm the
Mm.
youngest person in the room. I definitely look like I'm 12 years old. And so, what am I doing here? And to be able to have women across the board who have come and just championed me. And think, especially of this past week, where Alicia just like poured into me and just really
Mm.
affirmed the calling that the Lord has placed in my life, but then to also walk alongside her and her ministry and to be able to go, okay, what do you need? How can I best serve and reach different generations for the kingdom? And the passage that I love to think about is First Corinthians chapter 12, when it talks about us being the body, and exactly what Chris and Denise were saying of we're all given different giftings. We were all given a different year that we were born. How do we use that to glorify God, how do we use that to further his kingdom and for his glory? And I think we are a stronger unit. We're a threat to the enemy when we have that unity within the generations.
Wow, Faith, that is so true. And yes, thank you for this past weekend as well. I absolutely loved her pouring in. So I have a foster daughter who's in her teen, and she's in the troublesome stage right now where I just don't know what to do. And sometimes I can talk to other moms or others who've gone before me, but they raised their kids at a different generation than I did, you know? And this is a different generation. And so helping to talk to someone who's younger, who works with a younger generation, really helps me to have a different perspective. So we need older, younger, everyone involved. And you, like you said, Faith, super helpful. Would love to hear from even in the chat for those of you in terms of why you think um, women's ministry needs to have all these different generations. If you could throw that in the chat, that'd be great. As we look into that, I want to also ask another question. And this is from the perspective, maybe from speaking from your generation. And I'm going to ask Faith to represent two other generations as well as her own. But like, what do you have to offer from that generation to the church or to women's ministry as a whole? So, and then the third question I'll ask later is what tips would you give to women's ministry who are going to minister to the different generation? So this is really from your perspective of what do I have to offer? Anyone can take this. I'll start, Denise. I'll just start with you, Denise.
Okay, sure. I think when I look at my life and the things that I have to offer, I have some wisdom that mostly came from the mistakes that I made. So I can look at all these sisters around me and I can say, oh, honey, I tried that. It didn't go well. Let me offer you a different idea about how you might want to approach that. So I'm not saying that I'm super smart. I'm saying I've had a lot of life. And I can take that and say, okay, let's think about this and maybe approach it from a different direction. And so I uh, think that that's one of the greatest things that I have to offer at this point in time.
I would say for my generation, so like I said, I turned 50 my next birthday, which is, ooh, so close. Um, but I'm in what's the sandwich generation, right? So I still have my youngest is still at home. He is launching next year or this year, I guess. Golly, he's about to graduate. I have two that are already young adults, and I have ailing parents and ailing in-laws. And so I'm in the middle of, kind of almost an identity crisis of I've been a functional mom for 25 years with kids in the home, and they are now leaving at this point anyway. I'm sure maybe some will come back. But what do I do with maybe this new time that I have on my hands? But also realizing as I care for my parents and honor my parents, who for me don't live in the same town, that also is a struggle. But what's so great about it, that is looking to other people who have walked that road before, who have, my parents are not the first parents to have health issues. And so being able to have friendships with people who have walked a little bit further along that road to be able to say, hey, how did you encourage your parents? How did you put boundaries on your own life? What did that look like? And then to be able to turn around and go, well, now my schedule is more open. I'm not running to kids' games. I'm not running to kids' recitals and different things like that. And so, can I have more time to invest in the lives of people coming up underneath me as well? And I just wanted to do one plug. When I first started directing women's ministry at my church, we have a very multi-generational church. I was invited to a Christmas party for those 80 and above. And I was so ugly, y'all. I told my husband, well, I guess I won't have any solid food to eat because we'll probably just all be eating Jell-O. And I went into that experience just so like, this is going to be terrible. And I tell you what, I sat at that table. All those women were 80 plus. Every single one of them had lost a spouse, had lost a child, had lost a grandchild. And they could still come and tell me God's goodness. They could still share with me what God was doing in their daily lives. One of them was sharing what she just learned in scripture. And I sat there, first of all, so humbled. And second of all, so encouraged that the God that I have chosen to put my trust in is a good God and will see us through every season.
think for the boomer generation, if we will embrace the younger generations, if we will, even if we don't get them, which, is part of the differences in the generations, but we will love them enough that we see the importance of pouring into them. And we did not do all our stories. Our stories are not all about how great we did, and live through these experiences. But the older we are, the more stories we have behind us, that we can connect, for instance, with someone else going through that struggle. We should sometimes be the one that goes to them. If I had not had older women than me, I was a young woman like you, Faith, leading in a church where most of the women who had been in leadership in other ways in the past were much older than me. And yet, they support, like you, they supported me. I couldn't believe they let me lead them, but they did. But there was older women who then turned around and poured their stories out so that I could walk with them through similar experiences that I wouldn't have survived had I not known there are other Christian women. Because remember, the boomer generation was not super transparent. I'm kind of an anomaly in that I'm what you see is what you get person, but that is not norm for the boomer generation. And it's especially not the norm for the silent and the GI generation. So we've got to wake up in our older generations and say, I want to talk about what God has done. I want to share with these younger women how big he really is, how good he is. And like you said, Anne, how absolutely faithful he has been in every hard situation that he has allowed into our lives. And that wisdom, Denise, that you mentioned is there not because, again, we're still learning and growing. Don't think we have arrived. We have not. We are still learning, but we've had a few more things behind us. We have spiritual gifts that we can share. And we need to give young adults a place at the table. If we don't give young women a place on our leadership teams and allow them to lead us, like Faith, what you're doing, I am watching younger women serve as the leader over all of their women in big churches, sometimes huge churches, and they are in their 20s and 30s. And I am just going, go girl, do not, if God has called you to do it, he is going to use you. Do not be afraid. Do not let someone look down on your youth, as we see in scripture. But if he's called you, you be faithful, but call on them, and allow them to tell their stories. We don't think a lot of young people need to hear our stories. So we need to be asked sometime to do that. So don't be afraid to ask us that. And for boomers, we cannot allow ourselves to check out because of some of the situations, Anne, that you said. We still have children and grandchildren. We still have, some of us have parents living. And we too feel sometimes a time constraint, but many other boomers don't have all of those, and they have some time on their hand that if you show them the importance of what you want them to be involved in, they want to do it because they want to achieve something and they want to pour in where it is going to have value.
I love that. For millennials, I have a couple of thoughts on that. Taylor and I were laughing when we were having this discussion earlier because we had seen this just pictured on, I don't remember if it was Facebook or something, that we feel like really describes millennials. And it's just this idea that we're the bedroom generation. And so think about like when we were growing up, we would come home, we would go straight to our rooms and we would do our homework. We would, whatever, if we were doing art or games or whatever, it was hanging out with our friends. It was all in our bedrooms. And so I think with that, there is a hominess, I think, that comes with the millennial generation. We like to stay close. And with that is such a beautiful opportunity, I think you see within the millennial generation to want to have an open door policy within our home, to be able to host, to invite people in, and to not just be the church within the church building, but within one of the safest places that we can cultivate of our homes. And so I definitely see that with my generation. And I also think that just comes with the season of life that so many of us are in, right? A lot of millennials are still in the process of having babies, of getting married. And so sometimes that is just where you're going to find us, is with the kids at home, loving on them. And so sometimes it's we've got to bring those people that we're serving to our home, because that's just where our feet are planted at the time. But with that is a very missional opportunity. And I think too, with millennials, we are also a generation that I think has seen and had access to so much theology for women. And so there is such a deep hunger I'm seeing within my generation for theology to get deeper. And it's because of the faithfulness of the generations before us who have gone, hey, this is a need for women. And so, how can we provide curriculum? How can we teach these deeper things? And I think my generation has really, latched onto that. For generation, Z and Alpha, one of the things that I think about for them, specifically Generation Z, is just what they've grown up in, right? They've grown up through COVID, through the recession, through a lot of war. And so they are a skeptical group of people. But I think it was Chris that said earlier, too, the things that they have walked through are not things we haven't seen before. And so for the older generations to be able to go, hey, we have seen when there is a country where we have plenty and a country where, hey, we're struggling right now. And we're struggling with war, and it just feels like there's chaos everywhere. And so I think that presents a beautiful opportunity to walk alongside Gen Z when they feel really hesitant about the world and leadership. Um, but with that, I'm seeing this grit within Gen Z where they want to create, they want to lead. And so there's a beautiful opportunity to be able to reach out to this generation and go, okay, we have this event, and how can we pull you in to help design this and create this? And they are a generation that they want to be given, what is the task, what are the guidelines, but then leave me alone and let me figure it out. And then you come back and go, okay, what have we come up with? But there's a beautiful opportunity for a lot of incredible leaders that are coming up out of that generation. And I would say Generation Alpha, it's just a hopeful group of kids. And so I would say just keep them close, because there is a joy that they carry about them that we need in a world that is just screaming so much chaos and sadness.
Faith, you share that one story about this new like Gen Z that you're working with. Can you
Oh,
share that real quick story?
yes.
So it can
Oh,
kind
I
of be really
love,
practical for our ladies, you know?
yes. So when we talk about Gen Z and them wanting to lead, I have a student who we had just gone on a mission trip, and she fell in love with evangelism, right? Which is the best thing you can hear a student just wanting to learn and grow in. But she realized that we all have spiritual gifts that the Lord has given us. And she just said, hey, I'm recognizing that not everyone in our student ministry, evangelism is the thing that comes easiest to them. She said, I know there's a lot of students in our ministry that service is huge, and they want to use that spiritual gift to serve the community, to serve the different organizations and partnerships that our church has. And so I looked at her and I said, I love this. I want you to create a service team for our student ministry. And I gave her the boundaries, and we sat down. I said, I want you to pick the dates. So she picked the dates. I got a list of the different ministries that our church serves, and I slid them over to her and I said, all right, sis, which ones do you think will reach our student ministry? You pick. What time? Everything I said, you need to run with this, even to, I need you to design a slide that we're going to put up on the screen. And I want you to go up and I want you to announce it to our entire youth group. And the empowerment that she is just walking in, and it's beautiful to see how the Lord is transforming her and growing her. And it's helped me because I have so much on my my plate, so to be able to go, here, please take and run with this. Again, the blessing is mutual, right? And so it's just been so sweet. And she is in turn empowering her own generation to go, okay, what gifts and what talents do you have? And how do you use them to further the kingdom of God? You know, I'm passionate about serving and I've developed this team. What about you? So just to be able to watch this domino effect in our student ministry, it's all the Lord and it's kingdom work. And He's doing something really mighty in those group of students.
Yeah, the two key words I'm hearing from you is really empowerment and enablement, to
Yes.
enable them to be able to do that. But for you to walk alongside, you haven't said, okay, this is all on you, you take full responsibility, but for you to just really walk alongside a different generation. Faith, I know Chris had also mentioned things that she's done. And so as a boomer, okay, Chris, what is an example that I know you mentioned quite a bit about this before? So tell me from a boomer perspective, what is it that you can offer to a younger generation?
Well, a seat at the table, as I said, but I think this, what you just said, Faith, relates to all of our generations. Every generation should be doing that. And you've done that well at a young age. That's so wonderful to see that. So my challenge is to those older ladies is to get those women of different generations around the table and then allow them to take responsibility and to hand off in that way. If I didn't have young women, the one thing I said when I retired that I just couldn't bite off with the other responsibilities I already had at church was the D group, ministering to younger women through D group, and I specifically wanted to do younger women. Now, let me say this, my generation was not discipled well. We would never have studied theology and doctrine. That was like for the pastors only. We weren't taught to do those things. We didn't have a hunger for it because we didn't know. Once we tasted it, that's really was the core of what has developed as what we know as women's ministry today. But we didn't have access to that back then. But the fact that we weren't discipled well, once we started growing, then that should be something all of our generations then turn around and say, okay, I don't want someone else stuck and not growing as a believer in Christ. And so my desire was to work with young women because I love these hungry young women. It gives me such a confidence in the future of what's going to happen with women in and through the church in the future. So um, I'm in my sixth D group now, and absolutely, it is a thrill, and it's in my home. It is in my home. It's not at church, and I love hearing their stories, praying for them. I've got babies and grandbabies now, or grandbabies from these young women now that I feel like I've added to my mix. They're not counted in all those I mentioned a while ago, but they are there. And I'm meeting with one of my former D group girls next week with her second baby that she's had. And it's just a way that we do life together. And they know I have not done it all right. They know all that. They know that I did not grow as a believer until many years after I came to know the Lord. And that's why I want to not leave anybody at the point of salvation, but show them there are next steps. And they feed me. They feed me. And they ask questions my generation didn't even know to ask about scripture.
Right. And I know, like, even at Costco, that being at home, that sourdough startup kit is at Costco nowadays. So it's so funny how it's gone backwards now to
Oh,
this whole of like learning to live at home. And I think Faith had mentioned a little bit of that. It's a generation in which they tend to be more homebody. Like, I was shocked when my 16-year-old didn't want to go and do driver's ed and get her license. I remember when I was 16, I was at the driver, I mean, I did my driver's ed at 15 and a half and got my license at 16, but it's a different generation now where they don't want that. They're kind of scared to even go out. And so I think understanding those different generations, but also bring them alongside, as Chris had mentioned, like even having them in their home and investing in them and doing life together, so beautiful. I do want to address one last question, and we can always come back to this topic, is what tips would you give to the women's ministry leaders to minister to these different generations? Okay, if you guys can tackle the different generations, what would tips would you give them? Here's how you can best minister to generation blank.
So I'll start with that. I'm doing my doctoral work right now on multi-generational, putting actually together not really a program, but more of a process. I think what happens is we all go, man, we want multi-generational relationships. But a lot of our larger churches are going to be more siloed in age and stage, whether it's life groups, home groups, Sunday school classes, different things like that, where we don't always have overlap with other generations unless we're intentional. So I think the first thing as a women's ministry leader or in your church is to really, do you have fertile ground where some of these organic relationships can happen? Things where they're around a table, things maybe that you're working together in a service project where as their hands are busy, their mouths open. They're not just staring face to face with each other because that can be real intimidating. But do you kind of foster places, and you as a leader, do you really speak into, hey, you may connect with somebody at your table, and I would just, go grab coffee, go get dessert, go to dinner, go on a walk. Walking is great. You don't have to look each other's face, right? You can just walk alongside each other. But I think seeing, do we have places where that is organically happen? And then as church leaders, are we equipping our women? Because man, if I am poured into and told, I'm going to give you a really easy way to study scripture. I'm going to give you just some information about the different generations. I'm going to talk to you about what other generations, where they're coming and what they're bringing to the table, the good and the bad. Then we're just more equipped and we're more knowledgeable and we don't feel so out of our element. And I think that's what I see across the ages, across the generations. Everyone feels a little bit uneasy to step into this multi-generational friendship. But yet, when you do, as we've all said, it's so mutually beneficial, and it's a mutual blessing. It's not like the older person is the only one that gets the blessing or the younger person is the only person that gets the blessing. It is in God's economy in only the way that he can do it, mutually blessing.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with what Anne is saying, and I would say, the question you ask, Alicia, is about what can women's ministry leaders do? And I think one of the first things that you can do is to educate yourself about the different generations. You need to have a good understanding yourself, if you're going to lead others and encourage others to dive into this. And then another really important aspect of that is to have intergenerational relationships yourself. If you're not doing it, how are you going to lead others to do it? So you need to set the example first by being involved with generations that are older than you as well as generations that are younger than you.
Denise, you had a few more tips. I love that. What are some that avoid the trap of? I think you need to share that with the ladies.
Yeah, I will speak coming from a boomer generation. This is a really hard one for us, and that is wanting to do exactly the opposite of what Faith was talking about, of saying, here, you have my blessings, go forth and do. Instead, we're very reluctant to let go. And one of the things that we are reluctant about is, well, we've always done it this way before and it's worked. So why do we want to change it? And that is the nail in the coffin if you're trying to truly do intergenerational ministries. That will shut it down quicker than anything else. And I think, as leaders, when you're looking to put together, let's say, small group leaders or Bible study leaders, pair your older ladies with some of your younger ladies. That will naturally form a partnership between two generations or across generations. That's a real easy way that you can introduce this. And again, you've got two leaders then that are setting an example of what it looks like to have an intergenerational friendship. They're modeling that within their Bible study group. So modeling is really important. I think that's a really good way. And then I would say, finally, as you put your ministry team together, be very careful that you have representation from your church. If your church has 5 adult generations, then you should have those generations represented. Don't neglect looking at input from all of those generations. So those would be some of my big tips.
I
Right.
totally agree with that, Denise. I was going to say the same thing. If you look at your team and you see only a couple of generations represented, that is not going to reach all of your generations. And I think all of us have got to be willing to make changes. Changes not in purpose, but in process. We need to know what the purpose of our ministry is. Why do we exist? And how does that fit up under the purpose of the church? I mean, again, once we see that, then that helps direct everything that we do from then on. We ask each thing that we think about doing, we ask the question, how will this help us accomplish that? And we've got to have those different generations. I was sitting in my team meeting with the women. We have a full-time women's minister at our church, and she was talking about our next event, and she started talking about what they were serving. Well, I sit on this team, as I said, the matriarch, the oldest one on the team, of course, and they started talking about a dirty soda bar. And I thought, somebody's going to ask what that is. Nobody asked a question. All of them are younger than me. And I finally just said, time out. I have no idea what you're talking about. But what I found is that when I went back to other groups that I'm with, and I said, have y'all ever heard of a dirty soda bar? The majority of them, except the oldest ones, absolutely. And that's what reaches that generation. So we have to be willing to embrace those new and different things. I do not want a dirty soda. I drink sparkling water and not sodas anyway. So it didn't sound good to me, but it was an appeal to those younger women. And I am so glad that we did that. I think we need to ask, where are the generations coming behind us and how can we connect with them? But one thing I want to warn the younger generations, we talked about this at the forum, don't just come up and say, would you mentor me? Because that could mean forever. That could mean once a month over coffee and everything in between. But be specific. And for the older women that hear that word, when we first started doing mentoring in the church, back when we first started hearing the word mentoring and trying to figure out what we did, it was forever, basically, at least a long period of time. And many, again, Anne, you talked about your life being really busy, even though your children are leaving the nest, you've got other things. That's the case for many of the older women. They've got a lot of things going on, but many of them are looking for places to invest. And if some young woman says, can we go to coffee and I can just ask you some questions? I can't imagine many older women saying no to that. In fact, I would be so sad to hear that, because what they're going to miss is some of the sweetest conversation that could lead to a deeper relationship, but it might not. It may be a one-time thing. So be proactive in if you know a story of one of your older women, let's say, has been through a certain experience, infertility maybe, or something that has really marked their lives spiritually, and you hear of a younger woman just facing that situation, be proactive in just getting them together to have coffee. Maybe you just introduce them, because those could be some of the most effective and sweet times between the two, and one that's going to help a younger woman understand, again, like we said a while ago, how trustworthy God is, even in situations that don't turn out the way we really were hoping they would.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as you were talking about the older woman, I remember the first time somebody came up to me and said, "You're an older woman." And first of all, I kind of wanted to punch him, because I'm like, you are calling me old? But then I looked around and I realized I am actually one of the older ones in this room. And as we've aged, especially I think our Gen Xers, we kind of look at the generations ahead of us as that they're the older ones. We're not. We're learning from them. And then when suddenly someone comes and asks you to have coffee, to ask questions, can I kind of know about your life? Can I kind of know how you walk with the Lord? I feel like a lot of times we don't feel equipped. We don't feel ready, but yet the Lord truly has prepared us with life experiences, with friendships, with older women pouring into us to do this. I think sometimes we just go, wait, we're already the older woman? I thought we'd be way more prepared than that. I thought our life would look way more together than that, than it does. And here's the thing, we're all kind of a mess, right? I mean, this side of heaven, life is going to always be messy. There's going to be hurts, there's going to be heartaches, we're going to fall on our face. But can we do that in community together? And can we encourage people at the same time? Absolutely. I think that's what the beauty of that is. So I think sometimes even embracing that you are the older woman can be very humbling, but also it gives purpose.
And that, Darla, one of our participants mentioned this, and just a really great thing on the chat where she said that younger women really want authenticity, not perfection. And in our discussion earlier, I know Chris had mentioned it's so hard for the boomer generation to really dive into that because they weren't taught or raised that way. But it is such a big need for our younger generation, even for Gen Xers, for millennials on down, that is really important. Authenticity, that word that just continues to ring forth. And so I love that it's not perfection, it's being real and being honest with those things to really help them, and not also to think through the older generation as well. And I know that Denise and Chris have brought that up too, is for a lot of the older generation do feel underappreciated, okay, that they're not good for anything or they've retired and their usefulness is no longer there. And so that I think, what would be some tips there for the older generation? And then I want to come back to Faith to help us with the younger generation. What tips to give us to help with our younger ones? Because we really need help understanding them.
I think one of the things that occurred to me when Chris was talking a minute ago is just kind of encouraging the younger generation when they're asking for somebody to mentor them to be specific. I would put the same thing on the older generation. If somebody comes to you and says, will you mentor me? Say, well, what does that look like? What are you thinking on that? Because the range can be everything from, like Ann mentioned, going on a walk with somebody to a deep dive into a theology topic to how to take care of a diaper rash. I mean, it can be anything. So ask the question, well, what exactly are you looking for? What does that mean for you? And I have been very pleasantly surprised when I've asked that question. It's usually, um, it usually sparks some really great discussion.
Also, for the older women, what I would say, especially if you're in a younger generation, is just go to them and say, what has been some of the hardest experiences you've had in your life? Maybe they've never shared transparently about those things. And ask her, how did you make that through? And just start asking questions. I think a lot of women would share if they thought you wanted to know. And if you ask me where I've been, and now there may be some women that won't do that. I told you earlier, I tend to be somewhat transparent. But I always remember those hard things that the Lord has allowed me to go through because of what an older woman did for me in one of those hard situations. What I said after that was I wanted to be to other women like she had been for me in that situation, because it helped that hard situation not feel useless or just a hard experience, but there was a purpose in it, in that I could use that to connect with and minister to other women who are in that situation. And they don't have to be in different, a younger generation, or it could be just a similar experience. But if we could get our women to start connecting a thread of where God has shown up in their lives, where what I would call their memorial stones throughout their lives, and say, do you know how important that is for younger women to hear and see? Do you know there are women out there struggling who don't see how they're going to make it through an experience? They need to know that your experience is something that was so painful, and yet you saw God in the midst of it, even if it's not the same kind of experience, but it was just a hard place. So I would just say, keep telling your older women, you cannot quit the race until you're gone. You run across the finish line serving the Lord and being available to however God wants to use them and their situations that He has allowed them to have.
Faith, I'm gonna let you jump in really quickly for the last tip for
Sure.
younger generations.
Well, a couple things that I think about too is all of our ministries, the youth, the young adults, the married, all of the things. We need to be having volunteer opportunities for every ministry and every generation to be able to serve one another, right? Because then we're providing opportunity for crossover. We're providing opportunity for every generation to start feeling comfortable with one another, to be in the same space. And so I think that's something as church leaders we should be working together on is, hey, as a, youth leader, how can I partner with my girls ministry, with the women's ministry? They might be doing something that my girls don't need to be attending, but hey, they can come and serve the meal. They can come and be greeters. And, for my girls' events that I do, I am very particular in the women that I ask to come and serve and volunteer at my events because I want women from every generation, from every season of life, for my girls to be exposed to. And so there's something with volunteering that is really important that we really need to lean into. The other thing that I would say too is it's not just knowing the generation, it's knowing the season of life that that person is walking in. And so, when I think about, especially for millennials, a lot of women are, like we talked about, they might be going back to school, they might be getting married, they're having kids. And so life can be really busy. And so sometimes we don't see millennials sometimes showing up for these Bible studies. And I had a woman in our church who really she just locked eyes with me, and for whatever reason she just wanted to love on me. And when I was getting my master's in seminary, I really didn't have time to give to a Bible study. I was at home studying, taking exams, reading 1,000 books all at the same time, it felt like. And so, how she was the church to me was she would show up at my door with groceries and she wouldn't even come in. She would just drop them at the door. She would text me and go, "Hey, I'm driving by Starbucks. What do you want? I'm going to drop this off for you." Because she knew that I was just locked away in my home, just like nose in a book. There would be times where she would text me and go, "Hey, why don't you come read your seminary book at my pool?" Yes, please. I will do that any day of the week. And so different opportunities like that, she would say, "Hey, you need to take a break. Let's go on a walk." And we would just talk about what the Lord was teaching both of us. And she would tell me, "Hey, this is, the Bible study that I've been doing with the women's ministry." And I would learn so much from our women's ministry just on these walks, just because this woman was attending the Bible study, she attended the event, and now she's teaching me what was going on in those things. And vice versa. I was able to tell her what I was learning in seminary and all these things. And it was all because she just got creative with what loving someone in a different generation than her looked like. And she met me where I was at in a season where I really didn't have much to give. And for some of us, that's just our season. And we need to know when we're out of those seasons, it's our turn to pinpoint someone and go, okay, how do I lock eyes with someone now and love them really well? And for Gen Z, I would encourage you, they're the first post Christian, truly post Christian generation. And I don't want that to scare us because I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing is a generation that doesn't feel obligated to claim Christianity. And for so many of us before, that was huge. And there's just a transparency now. And so I would say partnering with Gen Z and teaching them how to evangelize and teaching them how to love their communities well and sharing the gospel is going to be really key.
Honestly, I think as you study up on these different generation, like even one simple tip, like Faith was talking to me, we were talking about this earlier. It's like even going on a walk, when you take them on a walk, it actually they don't have to make eye contact. That's really big. In our generation, it was like, look me in the eye when you're talking to me. But this newer generation does not do that. They will not look you in the eye. Little things like that, it's understanding these different generation that helps us to go, okay, they're not being rude and disrespectful because they're not looking at me in the eye.
Mhm.
So Faith, those were such helpful tips. So,
Yeah.
ladies, I got so much out of just even our discussion, learning about the different generation. Faith, you were going to say something, and then we're going to jump into, we have like 6 minutes for Q&A, and there's some really good questions in the Q&A. For those of you who've answered, please reach out. If we don't get to all the questions, please reach out to each of us individually. We'll have our websites and all these different ways to contact us as well. So, but Faith, you're going to say something. I cut you
No,
off.
I was just gonna affirm you with the eye contact thing. COVID really messed up some generations. Um, so that was all.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump into some really good questions that we have. I think a lot of women are asking. I'm trying to get like hit majority. The first one that popped in really early on is what type of event would you suggest to bridge the generations that would be effective?
Can I speak to that? Because I
Yes.
have actually done this and I've seen it done well. I think if we could get all the generations to, first of all, you're going to have to advertise it in a way that says, what do you not get about the generations about you? You know, what is it you want to learn about these generations that you don't understand? Have them come together and do some fun, humorous things and yet show appreciation for each one of the generations. And I think showing them the cultural events of how they were raised helps paint the picture of understanding the generation. I think in addition to that, showing maybe some fun things like the cars of that generation, the clothes of that generation, their fashion, their music, and then have them at tables that are mixed groups and encourage dialogue, have some questions, some things that they can talk to each other about, to let them at least be around the table and then hear how different each one is, and then begin to show them what are some ways that these generations can get to know the other generations and connect with them. It could be just a really fun, lighthearted, and yet very informative experience if they've never studied the different generations and what has shaped those generations. That's why they look at those generations and say, I don't get it. They just don't understand the real life. And yet their real life is very different from your real life.
Okay. Others that you've seen, can you, if there's others events that have been super helpful that you've participated or created in your own churches?
Yeah, I've had a chance multiple times to do a generational panel where we have representatives from each of the adult generations on the panel, obviously from your congregation, not from just random people, not your friends, but anyway, and just start out with, like Chris was saying, with some really fun, lighthearted questions. Just, what was dating like when you were growing up? What did you do for fun when you were growing up? Just some things like that to just point out. I mean, if you just take that one question, what did you do growing up for fun as a kid? That is vastly different, between my generation as a boomer and say Faith's generation and how kids do it. But start out with some light questions, and you can just move into some questions about was there a significant woman in your life that helped you, and what did that look like? Or if there's one thing that you could say to the generation coming after you, what would you say? And if there's one thing you'd like to say to the generation ahead of you, what would you say? And really just that really sparked some great conversation. And the last time we did this, Chris, believe it or not, we had a dirty soda bar afterwards, and I had no idea what it was. So I resonate with what you were saying, but it was great. And everybody had fun. And I actually heard through the grapevine, not directly, one lady said, after that, I gave them a real challenge to, start finding some people that were not in their generation. She said, I have started meeting with 5 different women that are not in my generation. And so, it can be a real organic way to get some things going. And it's a lot of fun.
And you mentioned Mind the Gap. You want to share?
Oh, it's just a fun board game. We've pulled it out before, and it's questions from all the different generations. And if nothing else, it's a really good ab workout. And a lot of times I didn't even know the right answers from my own generation. But it just, once again, it just goes to show us. And I think when you can start to, first of all, just admit that generational friendships there can be some awkwardness to it. But press into that awkwardness. It is worth it. to press through the awkwardness to get to the benefit of real, true heart friendships. Because at the end of the day, girls, we know we're all the same, right?
Right.
We may think things a little differently. We may, be used to communicating a little differently, but at the core of who we still are similar. So I always just encourage people, press through the awkwardness, kind of laugh about it, laugh when the older ladies are like, dirty soda, that sounds awful, or whatever. And just, I don't know, enjoy the differences. And I think that's kind of what that game does.
Faith?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind, and you guys are gonna laugh at me. Nothing beats a bingo night. And let me tell you, see, everyone just lit up. I don't know what it is about bingo, and I think as women, we love a prize and free things and bring it on. We love bingo. But one of the things I would say with each and every one of these events is find your connectors from every generation within your church. So who's that woman who you can go to and go, "Hey, you are representing, the millennials and you know so many women. Can I charge you with getting a group of other millennial women to fill this table for a bingo night?" And let them do the marketing for you. Find those connectors and let them do the hard work, because a lot of times when it's someone from their circle, it's a lot more, it feels more familiar for them to be able to come to an event and they don't feel like they're going to be alone. So, but play bingo. They will come.
Well, ladies, it is time. I mean, we have continually lots of questions that are coming up, and they all came up like towards the end. So we try to answer them. If not, please readdress those answers to me or to any of the panelists. You have their email addresses. Mine is very simple, alicia.wong@Lifeway. But you can get these email. If you can put their emails, is that everyone okay with that? That Taylor can put their emails in the chat box. But so many fun things to do. I think one of the big things I hear over and over again was really enabling those that are older and younger to continue to serve in the different ministries and to have the different generations be able to empower them and enable them to do what God's called them to do. Number two is create opportunities. And as you think through events, are they just tailored to one specific generation or are they multi-generation? And then creating those opportunities, like even doing fun things together or doing ministry projects together, all of those things, and marketing and targeting all of the different generations. I think that's going to be really big. Like I can just imagine even having like instead of just a mother daughter, do older younger, type things where they have to do something together, whether it's to bake something and then you have a bake off, of which team does better, or for even encourage the men, right, to have guys like not only play basketball together, but have some time where they can hang out. Not everyone does basketball. Some like to play games, but be creative in looking at what some things you could do the younger generations are doing versus here's what the older generation is doing and have them involved in each other's activities. I think that's really fun. But panelists, I just want to thank you. Participants, I want to thank you for joining us. This is a topic in which there's so much to do. We're going to have resources too that are listed. I think I know I'm 2 minutes over time, so I'm going to have to end, but everyone's going to leave. If you can leave one resource with the ladies that they can go to, can you just share that really quickly? I'm going to go really quickly around and thank you to everyone. And I'll give you some time. Chris, one resource. Unmute.
Anything by Jean Twenge. She's not a Christian writer per se, but she is a researcher on the generations and why they are the way that they are. So I would say that for one thing. For a discipleship resource for women, I would say Disciple Her is a great way to learn how to do D groups with young women.
Candy Galley.
Candy Galley.
I would add Brad Hambrick's book, Transformational Friendships, 7 Questions to Deepen Any Relationship. It's a great resource. You can just pick a friend that's another generation and go through that together. It's got some great conversation starters in it.
Anne?
Yeah, I was not prepared for this. I would say
Sorry for you.
But I will tell you, you know what I actually did before this webinar? I actually got on YouTube and said, teach me about the generations. And so I'm telling you, go out there, so much good information about different generations, just to raise your awareness. And to realize that you are not the only person thinking the thing that you're thinking, but there's also a lot of people thinking other things, and those are okay too. So I think kind of sitting about that tension.
And then Faith.
If you're looking for more research on generations, Lifeway Research has just done a lot. And so I would say go there. I would say, since I'm a girls minister, there's 2 books that Lifeway has done: Show Her the Way by Mary Margaret West. And then also This is Girls Ministry by Amanda Mejias. And so those 2 specifically are going to be really great resources as you're looking at pouring into the younger generations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. And also, just to let you all know, next year, our You Lead webinars are going to change to different name. We're rebranding, but we're still meeting together as a webinar. Our next one is going to be January 15th. It's Maintaining Your Christian Witness in a Politically Divided World. So that's going to be really hot topics, challenging. Hope you all can join us. You will have more information on our lifeway.com/training. You will be able to find out more information of all our training spaces. Thank you again, ladies. I appreciate you all and look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar. Thank you.